gentlemen, welcome to the newest episode of The Page Season 2, The Block. And if you're new, if you're new to the network, I mean, it's a great time to be alive because we are starting a brand new block series, and I want to give a big shout out to our Patreon supporters. This will be up 3 to 4 days after the actual video goes up, because we have to break it down. Patreon doesn't allow videos under 600 megabytes, so we have to kind of split it off. All right, and before we begin, before I introduce our co-host for this episode, we try very hard not to talk about politics or religion in this episode, in these shows, in this network. We don't allow it. We don't allow that type of stuff in the group. However, there are some times where it's just unavoidable, and this book is kind of unavoidable to exclude that kind of stuff because it's a big part of the book. Now, but I will say, but I will say when we talk about religion, it's only going to be pertaining the properties in this book. Nothing more and nothing less. Because there's Islam, the faith is really heavily used in the book. So I just wanted to say that, and just to let you know, I know we don't talk about religion or politics. However, some things are unavoidable, and to exclude that from the book, it's very insulting to the book, and we want to have a good civil debate. But just to let you know, when we talk about that stuff in this book, it's only going to be pertaining to the context of the book, nothing more and nothing less. Phew! I think I did good. I did good, internet. I did good, Facebook. Good. So now all that stuff out of the way, I would like to introduce our co-host on not only for this episode, but all the episodes of The Page. She is the one. She is the only, the talented, the beautiful, the whimsical, the magical, the mystical LB. How's it going?
Hi, thank you, Caveman. We got up to 6 compliments in that intro,
yeah.
So thank you very much. I'm going to start counting them soon enough to get up to like 25 or something.
So we're taking a look at the City of Brass, the Daevabad series.
Yes, the City of Brass, starting the Daevabad trilogy.
Yeah.
And this is by S.A. Chakraborty. So as you all know, or if you are a new listener, you may not know, in the first section of a new block, I always do a little bio about the author, because sometimes you can't read a book and you don't really need to know that much about the author, but I feel like it's always good to know about the author. We try our best on the page to cover authors from a broad spectrum of life, which means that we get some really interesting books. And I know actually this book was a recommendation from Urban Fantasy recommendations and a Facebook page that I'm on there. So shout out to you guys. I'll tag you later. So S.A. Chakraborty, Shannon, she was actually born in 1985 in New Jersey, so New York, and she was born to Catholic parents, working class. She was actually the first person in her family and in her extended family to go to college, which I thought was really cool. So something that you will note in this book, if you've been reading along with us, obviously you already know, or if you're going to start the book after this, FYI, definitely spoilers. You should know this by now.
Yeah, spoilers. I forget. I forget. I'm bad caveman. I shame now. Shame down. Yeah.
But yeah, so this book does have a lot of political intrigue.
Yeah.
And you did mention, there is there's influences of religion, specifically Islam in there, but it's not like, I'll say that, but it's not like it's shoved down your throat. You know what I mean? Like, there is a character that is specifically religious, but it's within the context of the novel. It's not necessarily, and she states this herself, I would like to say, Shannon states this herself, she knows that she's not speaking for the community of Islam. She knows that she's speaking only from what she
Well,
can
there's a lot
say.
of that culture in
There's
this book. There's like the prayer
absolutely.
cries, and that's why what I wanted to just say off the top, because there is a lot of that. There's a lot of Arabic like translation. There's a lot of people saying Salam Alaikum and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. And you know what's really interesting? You know what? We'll get into that because already we're going on a tangent.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on her bio, and it's really interesting because Shannon Chakraborty, she tends to keep her private life very private. Honestly, I could only really find 3 interviews that she's done online, and only 2 of those were even linked on her actual like page on like chakraborty.com. So okay. The lowdown on Shannon. First off, she was a big book nerd when she was a kid. She like read through everything, like I'm sure a lot of our listeners can totally relate to. And she went, she was in New Jersey, brought up by Catholic parents, working class. She actually still lives in New Jersey with her husband and her daughter, and she converted to Islam in her teens. So she graduated in 2008. From the American University in New Jersey, and she was specializing as a historian for international relations in the Middle East. So her idea was that she was going to work for the government or some nonprofit or something like that, doing international relations. She was just sort of doing a minor in history in Middle Eastern studies. She just thought it was really cool. She thought it was really interesting. And then things totally changed for her. She went to Cairo, magical place, and she went to the Rare Books Library in the University of Cairo, which honestly I would freaking love to go to. I mean, put me in any Rare Books library and I'm happy.
Yeah.
But she went there, and by going there and taking classes there on history and everything like that, as she describes it, she really got to learn history outside of the Western context, because I know a lot of our listeners are, from the Western world. A lot of our listeners, and me and you included, we know history from a Eurocentric view.
Yeah.
So she got to have a taste of history outside of that, and she got to, really delve into the beautiful Muslim mythologies that are over there. And she was like transfixed. She's like, oh my gosh, I never knew that, this could be so beautiful in such a way. So that really sparked that within her. And she started writing once she graduated in 2008. Now, what's really interesting about this, and I feel like a lot of people can relate because of what's happened with 2020 and COVID and all this crap. But in 2008, we had a huge economic collapse.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone remembers that, but we had a huge economic collapse, and she just graduated. So she was planning on doing international relations, but because when she graduated, there was that economic downturn, she basically was like, okay, I'm going to take whatever job I can because I need to feed myself and my kid and my husband, and be able to actually, live. So she ended up working at a medical office while her husband went to medical school. And that's when she started writing just to sort of keep herself entertained. She doesn't come from a writing background. She wasn't particularly artsy. She was actually really nervous even showing like friends of hers, like, hey, look, I wrote this little thing. What do you think? Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So for her to go from that to be a critically acclaimed published author is awesome. I think that's so cool. Okay. Now we get into our publishing sort of history thing.
Yeah.
Now, she joined the Brooklyn Speculative Fictions Writers Group. Whew, big word. At the urging of her husband to, to sort of explore it a little bit. And that's where The City of Brass really developed. It was published in 2017. She does have 3 other short fictions that were published in short fiction novels or short fiction magazines in 2011 and 2012. So obviously, still sort of experimenting there. But really, The City of Brass was built within that writers group.
Yeah.
And this won British Fantasy Award, the World Fantasy Award, the Locus Award. There was lots. And then the second book, which we will be covering next month, is The Kingdom of Copper. It was released in 2019, and she was a finalist for the John W. Campbell Award. And then, of course, there's The Empire Gold, which was released in 2020, June. So this is a really, really brand new series.
Yeah.
just finished last June, so like just over a year old is the finished trilogy. So I think that's really cool because we go from all sorts of things in this episode.
Yeah.
But in the page, I mean, we've covered Dune, which is like one of the first sci-fi books, you know?
Yeah.
And to go to today with this author. So just as one last note in her bio, she has a new book series that she's starting on working. It's going to be set in 12th century Indian Ocean, which I think is cool. Pirates. I'm reading pirates.
Yeah.
I want pirates. Okay?
Yeah, me too. Me too. I mean, I hope next series we do something with pirates because you promise me pirates all the time and I never get it.
Right? Space pirates didn't happen last time I was reading.
Motorcycle pirates.
Motorcycle pirates. We can do that.
Yeah.
So that's going to come out in 2022. Something to keep your eyes on. So for this book, she just, in all of her interviews, she really comes across as a very humble person. She's very much like, oh, I'm not a writer. I just kind of like published this book and it got a lot of awards and that's really overwhelming for me. But she also recognizes her privilege as a white convert because she converted to Islam. She wasn't brought up with it.
Yeah.
And for her, I mean, this book was really built in that time frame between, the Twin Towers going down and then the CIA having all of this. We don't need to get into it.
Yeah.
We don't get into politics on this site, but we know that being Muslim in the States is not easy.
Yeah.
So she wrote something for the youth to really have heroes to look up to. Because, I mean, for all of us, I think, that grew up reading fantasy, reading sci-fi, it's awesome to put yourself in those roles, and if you don't see yourself in those roles, it's a lot harder. That's why we try and really explore things that cover a lot of different avenues. So she was volunteering at a Brooklyn youth organization through her mosque, and she wanted to write something that represented the good nature of the youth in there because she saw that they wanted to really change the world in a way. Whew. Okay, so her bio in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That's literally everything that I could find.
All right. Okay. Now let's no, I was gonna mention. I think her handlers doing a really good job in keeping her private because in this business, it's really hard for handlers to just be like make their whoever they're handling private and say, okay, don't do this, don't do that, and then they do it and they're like, oh my god, dude. So I think her team.
Well, you know what? I think that speaks to how she came to writing, right? Because she wasn't doing creative writing before this. She was literally just doing it as sort of like a little fun thing for herself.
Yeah.
And because she has all of this knowledge about the Middle East and all of this historical factoids going around in her head, she wanted to really show a novel that explores that side. And I know when we first brought it up, we were both excited, like, hey, we haven't heard something like that. Let's read that.
Yeah.
Because it's not done. And that's why it's so cool.
Yeah.
She definitely got a lot of rejection letters when she decided to go for publication. And then her publisher, as she said it, was very, very protective of her and fought to make sure that she did keep those things in the book that were specific. In her own words, she wanted to write something for Muslim nerds like her.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a book for nerds.
Yeah.
Which is it's great.
Oh, yeah. So,
but yeah, so why don't we get into our X's and check marks?
So I'm going to start.
Okay, go for it.
I'm going to start. I love the lore in this book. When it comes to certain mysteries, okay?
Yeah.
I should rewind. Okay, so my lore is going to be definitely the check mark that I talk about after LB's check mark. But my really first check mark is it fills in a lot of blanks, but it does it where it makes a lot of sense. So the jinn. Okay, first of all, the jinn. All right, so in Aladdin, right, and in all these swords, sandals, epics when they talk about genies. You know, how did they become slaves? Like, what happened, right?
Yeah.
And in this book, she actually goes to a place where it makes sense. They die.
Yeah.
These magical creatures die, and they become slaves to a ancient ancestor, and then they and put them in a lamp or in a bottle, and they just force them into slavery. And that makes a lot of sense if you look at all the movies, and you're, especially when you look at these handcuffs, these golden bracelets on their wrist, and you're thinking, how do these, where do the jinn come from? And she does a very good job of saying they were magical creatures. They were just enslaved to do this. And when they're enslaved, they have a mark, and then they become super powerful. But the only way they use their powers is to is using them to serve their masters, and that's how. Yeah. And so I thought the book did a really good job of explaining where the jinn come from and that lore, but it does it in a way that it doesn't make you say, "Nah, that doesn't make any sense." When you read it, you're like, "You know what? That makes a lot of fucking sense." So.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to build off of that for my check mark, because I have a big check mark here for those mythological creatures that we don't normally see. Now, when I say we don't normally see, I mean in Western culture, we don't normally see them. And when we do, it's normally picked and chosen. Yeah. So that there are questions, and there are things that are like, okay, well, why is it like that? That doesn't make any sense to me. But because they're not actually telling that tale from that viewpoint, it's not going to make sense, because we don't have the backstory, we don't have the undertones that are there. But I absolutely loved how we had, we've got the jinn, we've got the Deva, the Ifrit, we've got the Peri and the Rook, the Ishtas, which was just a little small thing in there, but I absolutely loved those characters. The Ishtas were sort of like the little imps that have an obsession with footwear. Yeah. And so you'll take off your footwear, and they'll bring it back to you all clean and nice. Yeah. And I just thought with that, and I always do this for the first book. I will read it and then do the research. Yeah. Because I don't want that to really influence my reading of the book. I want to make sure I have all my X's and check marks, and then I'll go for it. And it's funny that we both have this check mark, because she's got freaking degrees in historical specialist in the Middle East. So, no shit. These things are going to be well laid out, because these are mythological creatures from the Middle East. It's not that she entirely created these, but what I love that she does is she makes them her own. She makes this world of it. She's asked herself, okay, so this is happening over here. This is happening over here. What would go on in this world if they were interacting in the same time frame? Yeah. Like these jinn, these Deva that exist for thousands of years. What would happen? Let's explore that. Okay, so they exist for thousands of years, so they've got to see eons of humanity pass by. What would that look like? I thought that was really, really cool. I loved those characters so much. Yeah. That magic element in the world, the Marids too, like the water creatures. Yeah. Oh my God, I loved it. It was fantastical. Yeah. And that's really, I think that really, really was one of my biggest check marks. Yeah. Because that's why we read books like this. Yeah. Is for that fantastical element, for that magical element, for that otherworldly thing that we feel like we can touch. The author makes it feel real for us, and she did a really, really good job with that. And I'm gonna bounce off your check mark and just give more context to my check mark. She connects the dots in a way that really makes fucking sense. She just puts two and two together, and she does it in a way where you're like, no, that doesn't make it. But in this book, she doesn't do it in a way you're like, oh, it doesn't make sense. She does it in a way with like, that makes sense. That's why the mirages are there. They're magical creatures just appear to us
as mirages.
Yeah.
These ancient magical cities would appear to us as mirages. It's those it's kind of the veil being like lifted for a brief second and then closed. Oh my God, it was so brilliant, and it was so subtle, and it was just like, yeah, that makes sense.
And you know what else I loved about that?
What?
This is sort of a double check mark for me,
Okay.
because I have it. I'll talk about Nahri, which
Yeah.
is the main character in here. But what I loved that she did with introducing this and explaining those things is it wasn't overly exposition.
No.
You know, like sometimes you find this trope of an author trying so hard to create a world that they know that they have to explain.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, people aren't going to get it, and there's nuances that they're not going to understand.
Yeah.
And so they over-explain things, and then you lose the magic there. You lose that sort of discovery and almost part of the mystery. However, you know, there's a fine line between not explaining enough so that it doesn't make sense and over-explaining too much so it feels like you're being talked at. But she used this trope, and I'll get to this later when we go into our exes, but she used this trope, which is used a lot, of, you know, someone that's from the outside of the human world that is actually a part of this magical world, but they don't know it yet. The story follows their discovery of that. And so with that, it's really, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it is easier to bring the audience along with you, because you have, sorry, fire alarm's going off.
Oh no, LB, get out of there, quick.
My curse. It's fine.
It's done. That's your curse.
What
What have you done? LB, what kind of weird voodoo?
I'll have to tell them afterwards. Yeah. Be like, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I know it wasn't you, but it was my fault.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope it's not actually fire. That's a big thing.
You want to go and check? Oh, Banff?
Yeah, give me 1 second here.
All right, okay? So we're gonna hear from LB in a second, but I really love how she put 2 and 2 together, and it's a way that it makes sense. And I think also what helps this author in this book, she does not have to create a giant world. She doesn't have to create a world that needs to be explained because it hasn't exist. This stuff exists. Yeah. Jin is built in our mythology. All this is built into the mythology, but all she has to do is put 2 and 2 together, and she does. I mean,
yeah, she just sort of like sorry, the house is not on fire.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm done baffing. I'm done.
She sort of just holds your hand and leads you to these stories rather than trying to create them. Part of me wants to say, like, okay, that's sort of cheaping out because these worlds, like, you know, they're already existing. Yeah. However, I enjoyed it so much, I don't think I can say that, you know, because it's so different. And it's so much from, just ignore it. It's fine.
Every episode. Oh, jeez.
There has to be something. Oh my gosh! And it only ever happens once a month. It's not even like It's, you know what? I'm gonna say it's your curse, because this never happens when I'm.
It never happens to me. This always happens to you and us on this show. I buy new equipment, it craps out all of a sudden. Brand new HomePod, it dips down in all audio quality. Why? And then it comes back. It's amazing. Okay, continue.
You said something. You mentioned it. You brought it upon us. I'm blaming you for this one, even though it's coming from my side. I'm blaming you.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
Anyway,
you blame me.
Anyway,
now.
Continue. What's your next check mark?
So, my next check mark, is kind of what I alluded to in my first check mark, is the lore. Since this mythology has already existed and there's stories, all she had to do is put 2 and 2 together and just expand this idea just a little bit and make it more bigger, right? And I loved it. I loved the petties. I love the idea of the different factions, the different tribes. Yeah. I thought that was really cool, and they all hate each other, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And it's not. It's not. It's not when I say they hate each other. It's like, oh, they hate. No, it's more complicated than, oh,
Yeah.
I'm angry at you. And I thought it was really
No, it's family feud.
interesting. And I'm going to get. Might as well talk about it now. Since what's
Mm-hmm.
happening in like in the Middle East is so complicated, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have one tribe, you have another tribe, you have another tribe, and they all kind of don't like each other, but it's more complicated than I don't like you. I like how she put that complication into this book and say, look, the reason why all these different people hate each other, it's not because one thing. It's a lot of different
Yeah.
things, and it's just more involved. And
Yeah.
I
I
love
have that
that.
as a check mark too.
I love that. I love that,
Absolutely.
and it's just it's a metaphor for what's going on in the Middle East right now,
Yeah.
and I love it because a lot of people would say, oh, it's easy to settle out what's going on. It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's
It's
very
really not.
it's
It's
really not.
years and years and
It's
years of history
it's
there.
years and years in history, and I love how that she kind of put that in this book,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't make
Absolutely.
it vague. You know, I think it would be really easy and really insulting to what's going on in the Middle East
Yeah.
if she did that. But she didn't. She's
Yeah.
like, look, the reason why all these tribes and all these jinn hate each other, it's not because of one thing. It's a lot of things. And it's
Yeah.
more involved than what you think. And that would be like my second check mark would be the lore, and the
Yeah.
second check mark would be the political nature of the creatures and the tribes, because it's just brilliant how she puts it into words. It comes off confusing in the book,
Yeah.
but that's on purpose, right?
Yeah.
That's very much
Yeah.
on purpose. Like, you see the petties, and you're like, well, I don't understand. Why do they like why did the Nafis hate hate these tribes, and this
Yeah.
tribe hates this tribe, and this tribe? It's like, I'm so confused. Like, is this? It's on. If you don't, if you just take a face value and you're like, well, this is just overly complicated for overly complicated. But if you analyze what's happening over in the Middle East right now
Yeah.
and take it towards this book, it actually makes perfect sense, because of what's happening over there. It's not easy, and it's overly complicated because these tribes go back years and years and years. There are deep seated, there's blood hatred there, and it's more complicated. And the
Yeah.
fact that she took that and put it in this book is really great.
Yeah. That's a huge check mark for me as well. I have right here, the complexity of the politics and the morality in this book. We have these two major, we have the Nahids and the Katani, um, as the two sort of, I guess, ruling classes
Yeah,
of these tribes. And there's lots of history there, which is explained. And again, it's explained, but it's not done in such a contrived way. We
yeah,
learn alongside the characters, and we're given just enough to answer our questions, but not too much so that we're like, okay, I get it. You're trying to explain this. Can we get out of this conversation with this character now?
yeah,
And what I really love about that is they present, Shannon, she presents these complex issues of morality.
yeah,
I'm going to step aside from politics because, there's palace intrigue, there's
yeah,
politics on that level. Some critics have compared her to George Martin, because of the palace intrigue,
yeah,
that sort of stuff. Like, it really people love that stuff.
yeah,
It's fun. It's something that we are never gonna get to see, unless you're Meghan Markle or whatever.
yeah,
You're never gonna see that stuff. But what I really loved about that is it presented this idea of identity politics, where Nahri is just learning that she's attached to these people and she's attached to these Nahids, and then she's being told the history, and she's like, okay, well, good. They should have risen up and they should have spoken about I can't remember the name for them now. The Shafrit.
Shavis?
Yes, the
Yeah.
Shafrits. How they were persecuted, and the Katani rose up and defeated the Nahids, and she was happy about that. And then it was discovered that she was part Nahid, and then alongside this, we're learning how the Katani are ruling.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to what's being described as the Nahids.
Yeah.
And so we have these two characters that were being given these emotional bonds to. We have Ali and we have Daevabad.
Daevabad.
Yes, there you go. You got it this time.
Daevabad.
We have both.
I love that. It's so cute. That's so good. That's gonna be the name of my dog. Daevabad.
Oh my god! You better look into meaning behind that first.
Yeah.
You don't want to be summoning any demons or anything like that.
No.
You're calling your dog at the park. It'd be a remake of this. But what I think is really interesting about this is we have this, knight riding in on a shining horse, basically, to save Nahri, and then we learn about this horrible history that he's committed, but he committed it under, a bound rule. Right?
Yeah.
He thought he was right. And then we have on the other side, we have these other people that committed all these atrocities, and they thought they were right.
Yeah.
And we've got Ali, who's very, very religious, and he's almost made fun of in a way by his family for being so devout. But he's so devout to his religion. However, part of that, people would think that he would be shunning the Shavrits.
Yeah.
But he's the person in the royal family, spoiler alert, he's the person in the royal family that's trying to help them, that's actually trying to be on their cause.
Yeah.
And so, we have these two conflicting ideas of the super religious zealot who's actually trying to help people, which is not something that we generally see now. And we have this, righteous person that was only following orders, that created, mayhem and destruction and chaos. But they're both complex characters. And the issues of morality, you really get to question those things.
Yeah.
And she leaves those questions open, she has open-ended answers for those questions. And because it's not a cut and dry, and I think a lot of the time in fantasy fic, in these sort of stories, we get this hero, and yes, they may be rough and tumble from the streets and blah, 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 but deep down, they're really good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your answer to it.
Yeah.
It's not, they have to live with the ghosts of their past. They have done bad things. They still believe that stuff, but they're still a good person. These are creating much more complex issues for us to actually think about and discuss in these books. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's something that I haven't really seen an awful lot in. And I think it really goes to show how Shannon, the author, trusts her audience to be able to take on those questions and still run with it.
Yeah.
Not to be spoon-fed the answers. I think it's a huge check mark for me. It's one of my biggest check marks. What's your next check mark?
That is the tribal stuff. That was my check mark. That was my other check mark.
Okay, so let me bring up a different topic because we beat this one to death.
Yeah.
So okay. My next check mark is how the real world meets fantasy.
Yeah.
Absolutely love how we get into this book. And of course, we've already talked about how there is that historical relativism, or not historical relativism, but the reality that she brings in there. We're in 18th century Cairo when we first begin, which is really interesting because that's just at the cusp of when we have Eurocentric colonialism enter into Egypt.
Yeah.
I'm not talking Romans, obviously, not Eurocentric, FYI. But it's really interesting to see that, and we get that sort of echo of life from there, and then we get transported into the fantasy realm. I just think it's really, really cool. And there were some tidbits that she threw in there, and my nerdy self just absolutely ate it up. Like, say, for example, when Nahri is learning, medicine, she's learning the medicine of how you heal devas and all this sort of stuff. And you've got the humors, which is a Greek medicine, like from ancient Greece.
Yeah.
Which, of course, we know is, all hooey now.
Yeah.
Like, the humors of your liver and your bile and all that sort of stuff I'm sure someone's written an essay about how it can be somewhat accurate at some point in time, whatever. But how they have that and how I laughed when I saw that come up, because it's like, it's brought to light as an actual real thing for healing devas, but obviously it doesn't work for humans.
Yeah.
And Nahri's here being like, no, people go to school for years to treat humans. I should not be doing this right now. I can't do surgery.
Yeah.
Just thrown it, and it's just, I love it. I absolutely love how we had this real world meets the fantasy, and it doesn't have too much of a clash.
Yeah.
I really liked how
that's what I
like
too, yeah.
And of course we have the age-old story. I'm not going to get into that. We have the age-old story of that travel so that we get to the fantasy land. It's very, I don't want to say cut and paste, but it follows that trope. But it works, and it works for a reason.
Yeah.
I really love that. I really loved how we had that real world, how we had the Franks and the Ottomans, the Turks. Amazing.
Yeah. So, my next check mark then, and this will be probably my last check mark. My last check mark is how the king was portrayed. Al-Qatani. Usually in these books, the king is usually portrayed not knowing anything or just being there to yell at people. I really liked how the king was portrayed in this book. He is smarter than a box of rocks. There's a scene where he talks with Ali, and he's like, son, you don't think I know what you're up to? And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, you're going to do this because I know blank. And he's like, oh, and I'm like, oh, shit.
Right, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, look behind you. Look at the guards. Yeah. Yeah, I was testing you, idiot. And guess what? You failed. And there's multiple times in the book where that happens. So, like, I don't know. I love that. Because usually you read something and you're like, oh, the king is so dumb, dude. He's so dumb. But not here. Al-Qatani is smarter than a box of rocks.
Puppet character, right?
So, I love that. I know he is somewhat of a, he doesn't have his attentions. Oh, he's not the greatest good guy in the world. But I personally liked him. I liked how he's not good, yes, but
he's not necessarily bad either.
Yes, he is just in a sticky situation. And he's saying, look, I'm just...
King.
What?
I think that's, personally, I don't think a king can be all good or all evil.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to have, like, some Disney villain or whatever.
Yeah.
I
agree. I just think he's like... He says multiple times in the book, I'm like, look, this is what we have to do. You don't like it? Go away. Go from me. But, that's my last check mark.
Yeah. Okay, so my last check mark. Well, I kind of already mentioned, the magic and how I love how there was like the elements, we had the creatures of earth, of fire, of water, of air. I love that part. But my actual last check mark here, the character of Nahri. Now, you know me, I always got to talk about my strong female leads. And of course she is one. I like how when we were describing this book.
Is she?
I love that you asked that because not really. She is in a way. She's living in this world where if you don't have a husband, if you don't have a family, of which she has neither, you're nothing. And she's still existing in this world. She's quite a badass in Cairo. She's swindling, she's doing this, that, and the other thing. She's magical, she's got these healing powers. really great. And then she enters into the palace, and she gets bamboozled on her first sit down with the princess, right? Like, it's sort of like she gets led into this world where she doesn't really know what to do. But she makes her way with it. I'm going to talk about what I didn't like in my exes.
Okay.
So if you want me to start with my exes, I can, because the character of Nahri is kind of a check and an X.
Yep. I was conflicted there. I was conflicted, and I'm like, is she though? Her. Is she really? All right. Okay. All right. So we're gonna go through exes now, but because this episode has to be split up into 2 videos, so we're just going to give a countdown. Sean Cook, you're listening to this. We're gonna start part 2. I'm gonna count down from 3 to 1, and then Patreon viewers, you can see this on the other side. Okay, 3, 2, 1, 0. Pause. Okay, let's start with your exes.
Okay, so character of Nahri. I did love how she was complex in a way. She was sensitive. She was intelligent in a way. You know, she's the person who negotiated her own bride price, kind of thing. However, oh boy.
Yeah.
She just kind of like gets whisked into this romance and gets defined by it. She gets left behind at the palace, no longer sort of in the thick of things. Even on this whole big travel, she's just put on a carpet and traveled somewhere, and then she messes that up, and then he fixes it, and then she messes that up, and then, he fixes it. I did kind of like how she wasn't magically just good at swords, kind of thing.
Yeah.
How it was portrayed as, no, this is something that you learn for years and years and years and years of your life to be able to actually fight people properly. I liked that realism in there because, she wouldn't realistically know how to fight with weapons. She might know a little bit here and there from the streets or whatever, but not really. But my first real big X, the romance. It's so cliche.
Yep.
Literally, as soon, like, the paragraph that they introduced Deva, like,
Dada yada hoosh.
Jesus Christ. Yes.
Yeah.
Dada yada hoosh. Literally the paragraph when they introduced him, he's got tattoos, he's muscly, he's this, he's that. I'm like, oh fuck, he's gonna be the romantic interest. They're gonna have a romance. Oh my gosh. Part of me, and I feel like we've been spoiled a little bit with our past couple of authors because I don't want to put Chakraborty down, but they are authors. They have been writing for a long time. They are, not that she's not intelligent, but they write beautifully. This is her first book.
Yeah.
This is her debut book that she wasn't really intending on writing, and she's not really a writer in the first place.
Yeah.
So I can forgive a little bit of cliches and that sort of stuff, but holy crap.
Yeah.
This romance was, I saw it a mile away, and as I'm reading through, I'm like, oh god, please no. Oh, okay. And then I'm reading this Allie character, I'm like, oh god, no, there's going to be a triangle, isn't there? And because she doesn't like him at first, no, of course she doesn't like him at first, and oh, of course now he's gone and they're going to go in the past. Like, it was, I could write it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I couldn't write it because I didn't write it, but like, I was just so disappointed in that. I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it, because sometimes it's nice to enjoy a little, like, it's sort of like enjoying a rom-com, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not deluded to think that that's the best film out there.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like I can't enjoy it. I generally don't. I generally like action-adventure movies. But
yeah.
Neither here nor there. But
yeah.
It killed me. I was like, oh, no, why'd you have to do that to our strong, independent female character?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah. She doesn't really have any conversations with any other female characters. Like, to be honest, she doesn't really.
Yeah.
She has that one conversation with the princess, and then she has maybe a couple conversations with sort of like her maid. It's not her maid, but sort of her maid.
Yeah.
Just a couple conversations as are shown in there, but she doesn't really have any like character development with any other female characters in here. It's so disappointing.
And I'm gonna bounce off of that.
Please.
That's going to be my first check mark. X as well. I'm just gonna touch upon that. She's when she gets into the palettes, and she's being manipulated so easily.
Yeah.
She's really dumb in the palace. She is really fucking dumb. To the point where her assistant, one day, when that 300-year-old man and died in her care, and her assistant's like, do you not realize what's happening? God damn it.
Like, how could you miss this? It's so obvious.
Yeah, you're being manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
You're being manipulated. You really are.
Yeah.
And it's kind of off-putting because we're here, oh, she's smart, she's a great thief, she's all this. And she gets to the palace, it's so easy. It's so easy, man. And she's like, oh no, what are you talking about? No. And she's like, yes, and I'm no. Yes. Yeah. You want facts? Here's facts.
Exactly.
And she's just...
I totally agree with you. I'm really hoping in the next 2 books we see a little bit more development outside of her romance. I really, really hope. Because this was enjoyable to read. It was enjoyable to read. It's fluff, you know?
Yeah.
I wasn't kidding myself that I thought it was some massive intellectual thing in terms of the romance that happens in here, in terms of her character. But I really hope that changes.
And
that could really make this a massive series.
I just want her, like, a little bit more smarter and intelligence. Yeah. I need to see some development.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just... I'm sorry.
It's a huge plot hole almost. Yeah, please.
It's almost like we meet her in Cairo, right? And she is the smart one. She's the con artist. She is manipulating everyone. And it's like when she goes and she flies to this magical city, she goes backwards in development. And we start from square one. It's just like, okay, granted, she should be in shock and everything, but she still should be wise. It's like, maybe I shouldn't drink this magical wine. Maybe these people are trying to take advantage of me.
Right?
I mean, the king said...
I mean, like,
sorry. Sorry, go on.
No, it pissed me off that... Yeah. Because even throughout their journey, she's worried about being in this world of devas that she doesn't know. She's scared of them. They have all these magical powers. She's not in tune with hers at all.
Yeah.
She's worried about it, rightly so. And, like, Dava, like, eases her worries, but, like, she just met this guy. You know what I mean? And, like, they've been through trauma together, so, of course, she's going to bond with him. But, like, it just pissed me off so much how literally it was, like, the first thing that she did was go take a bath. Yeah. And then meet this princess. Yeah. And, like, her feelings up to a point are valid. Yeah. But then it's like, oh, I don't normally drink wine. Oh, well, I guess I'll just drink wine. No. Yeah. That's not the character that was presented to me. The character that was presented to me would have stayed thirsty. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you just traveled through the fucking desert. You're telling me that you can't not drink wine right now. Yeah. That's ridiculous. Yeah. You know? And, like, that she loses all of that skepticism. Yeah. Especially, like, being in the inner sanctum of the palace. I'm not trying to say that she should know how the palace works. Yeah. But she would be suspicious. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. About these people that are being nice and friendly. Yeah,
all of a sudden you're nice, and the king's like, oh.
Enemies of her kin. Like, you kidding me here? Yeah. She shouldn't be so trusting right off the bat. And it's just, it really breaks part of it. It really is a big X for me. I agree. Yeah. So, my second X, and this is where when I give the little speech up the top comes from, as well. All right. The culture of Islam is very complicated, and they have the Arabic language and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
in this book, there are so many references that are given that for the headwear that's given, that's not the correct pronunciation. It's called the hijab. That's never said in the book. What women wear. Okay.
Okay. So so we're talking about 18th century.
But it's still 18th century.
Different.
I know I know it's different, but I mean there are correct pronunciations of certain things that should still be there or be explained, right? Mm-hmm. So when people back then still said goodbye or hello, it's salam alaikum, right? Or alaikum salam. That's only said a few times in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's said a lot more times than you're picking up on.
No, I've read the entire book, and it's almost said. I actually have notes here. It's in my I counted. It's only said about 8 times in the book.
Mm-hmm.
In certain chapters, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's fine. That's fine, but it's almost like she was very timid in that way.
I see, yeah.
And either you go for it or you don't go for it. And I would rather of her just be authentic as she possibly could have to that aspect. So that's what made that's my act. Just mispronunciation or missing the fact that in this situation this would happen, right? And this word would be given instead of saying, we're gonna just say it sometimes. Either you say it, you don't have to say it all the time. I acknowledge that. But it's either you open the door or you don't open the door at all. It's fine. If you don't want to use it, if you don't want to use those terminologies, you don't have to use it. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about the Middle East, especially making a book about the Middle East and the culture and the different mythological things, you either open the door or you close the door. You don't open a crack, because then that is just going to make it, what you're writing, very uneven. So that would be...
See, I hear what you're saying. I totally hear you. For me, like, opinion-based, I disagree. I think they did a really good job having enough so that it felt like the culture was represented, but not too much that it didn't feel alienating. Not that really my white ass should be taken into consideration for that, to be honest.
Well, I'm saying
I think they did a good job with it. I know that they worked on it. However, that's purely an opinion thing. Like, sometimes we don't agree on everything. In these
for
things.
sure. That's just going to be. I'm not saying I'm not saying this book it's not well represented. It obviously is. No. But my problem is just the door. Not like you're choosing to. You're choosing.
You would have liked to see more of that.
Yeah, you're choosing to exclude certain things when you're writing, and you're choosing to infer them back in. It's either, to me, one or the other.
Yeah,
that's just my personal writing style, and I just that's something that I can't not like mention.
Yeah, that's fair. I disagree, but I totally hear where you're coming from. And I don't think you're wrong. Okay, my next X, and it's my second last one. I don't have an awful lot of X's. But this one...
I have one more X, too. I have one more X, too.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. So... not actually killing off characters. Like... no one was actually really killed in this. Like, no one important, you know? And I don't want to say it because I don't want to be heartbroken over these characters that I've just bonded over. But, sometimes as an author, you have to do those sort of things. And something that I thought, obviously, it's going to make a major plot point, and the Marids are like, this is going, like, with Ali dying, right? With Dava shooting him falling in the water. Major plot point, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
If you don't want the spoilers, do not listen. But, he fell off the boat and he gets possessed by this Marid and then, comes back to life. And then he's back to life and he's all fine, but he's still sort of possessed. And, obviously, so obviously, at the end of the book, he's banished, and it's going to come back later. In the second book, 100% it's going to be a major plot point. So I get why it's done. I actually am really intrigued to see that because I love water creatures. I think it's amazing. I'm a mermaid at heart, so I really want to see what she does with that sort of stuff.
Are you an H2O fan?
Me. Am I an H2O fan? Is that what you said?
The series.
I'm a major H2. Oh, I didn't know there was a series called H2O.
Oh my God! You don't?
What?
Oh, you haven't seen H2O?
I don't really watch TV.
It's mermaids, dude. It's like.
Well, I'm gonna have to go watch
yes!
it.
Yes, it's a TV show. Shame, Albie. Shame. It was done in.
I'm too busy eating sushi and splashing about in the pool.
Okay. Well, if you have Netflix, you can watch it on Netflix.
I'll watch it. I promise you, I'll watch it. But I'm really interested to see what they do with that. But it's just. So we had one major character die, and he wasn't really a major character. Oh my God, I don't know the name. But he died. That was a major plot point. So maybe there can be something said for that. Like, that's definitely going to spark something.
Yeah.
But out of a cast of 20 characters, one person dying.
Yeah. And
we had this massive escape and all this fight scene and all this sort of stuff, and one person died and came back to life, and that's what you. It just felt a little safe.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the second book's going to turn out. Maybe we have a whole big uprising. Maybe a whole bunch of people die. Who knows? Who knows what chapter one's going to hold for us in that book?
Yeah.
But it just, it felt a little safe.
Yeah.
I do have one last X, but I want to hear what your last X is.
All right. So my last X is Ali. I don't care about this character. I don't care. I don't care at all. When we were bouncing back from Nari to Ali, and we were going to go to Nari, and I was like, back to Ali, I'm like, I realize you're setting up this world, and you have to do these bunch of different things, but Ali is just such a bland character. Yeah, you gave him the cool Zulfikar, and he's like a mighty warrior, but he's never portrayed as such. He's just portrayed as a massive dork. Just a massive dork. And I like, somebody kill him. Somebody kill him. Not when that scene.
When he came back?
Yeah, I was disappointed. I was like, when that scene was like, oh, he's gonna die. Oh, he's gonna die. Actually, if he died, if he died with that assassin, if he died, that would have made things much more interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
But he didn't.
I totally agree.
He didn't. He came back. Actually, came back twice. So, counting
right,
the ending. Yeah,
because he got healed from the assassin, and then he got possessed by the man.
I don't care. I would have rathered one of the main characters been Abba, the king. I think he would have been more fascinating. I was fascinated every time he was in a scene in the book.
He was a really interesting character. I would have really liked to see more of him. I agree.
Yeah, and I just don't care. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why? He's just a massive dork. That's it. That's it. So that's my last X.
I will say I did like what she was trying to do.
Yeah.
I liked that idea of this dorky guy that's fully into his books, but is also like a martial arts guy. I felt represented by that. But he wasn't quite interesting. You know, he didn't quite captivate. And I think that's a big issue that I have with this book. You know, how that character is written, how this romance is written, how there's all these tropes in here.
Yeah.
It's very clear, like, it's not an overly sophisticated novel.
Yeah.
It's not. It's very clearly, like, when I read, this is the first book that she's published, and previous to this, she has written 3 sort of short stories. And that's it. I'm not surprised. I'm so thoroughly unsurprised, because I don't want to say it's juvenile. I definitely don't want to say that. But, you know, she seems new in her writing, you know?
Yeah.
And she doesn't, like, she knows it. She knows, she's like, yeah, this is the first novel of mine. You know, my first novel is kind of, so just as a reviewer of this book, it's not overly sophisticated. You know, you're not going to get Ta-Nehisi Coates in this.
Yeah.
You're not going to get some of the, you know, even Dan Brown, who I didn't like.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get that same sort of feel from them, you know? Like, there. With that being said, though, I'm going to make this an X and a check mark. With that being said, it's not an overly sophisticated novel, but god damn, it was enjoyable. I literally read this in 2 days. It had me coming back. I wanted to learn more. And a lot of that was because of the magic, because of the characters that were, like, they were sort of pulling me. It was more the story than the characters.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a page turner,
yeah.
You know? Like, I went through that thing fast. And I kind of liked that after the previous novels that we've read were a bit more intellectual, and a bit more work to get into, if you will. Like, they were definitely enjoyable, but they're a bit more work. And this felt like a nice breather. It's more fluff to me, but it was definitely enjoyable. So I don't know about you. I'm going to go ahead and say, for me, I'm going to say yes. I would recommend. This is one of those books that I would recommend bring with you on vacation.
Yeah.
You know? It's a beach novel kind of thing. It's not necessarily, you know, like a romance novel kind of thing, but it's not something that I would recommend if you're looking for something to really dig into and, like, have deep thoughts about and, like, question yourself on. That's not this book, but it is enjoyable. I definitely enjoyed it. It has its faults. It's definitely a new book. It's a first book of an author.
Yeah.
But it was good. I enjoyed it.
I think this is a good entry-level book into science fiction.
Yeah.
If you're a big reader in science fiction, I would say don't read this. If you had, like, many years and many books, I wouldn't say check this book out. But for the entry level person that just wants to get into fantasy and science fiction and mythology and all that kind of stuff, take a look at this book, and I'll Oh, sorry. I'm going to give this, like, a big. I'm going to give this. It's hard. It really is hard. But that's mostly because I'm a big reader and all this kind of stuff. So I'm going to give this a thumbs up and a recommend asterisks. If you're a really experienced reader in this stuff, in sci-fi and fantasy, don't read this book. You're probably not going to like this. But if you are if this is one of your first books, if you're like, oh, I want to get into the genre, what book Caveman and LB, do you recommend? I recommend this book. So check marks with the asterisks on that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what I realized just there, and what's probably sort of what our not what we're sort of differing on a little bit on our opinion.
Yeah,
this felt like a YA novel. It really did.
Yeah,
it felt like one because it's not dumbed down, but it doesn't have those. I mean, it does have complex issues in it. It does have complex thoughts and that sort of stuff. but it felt more like a YA novel. And I feel like she wrote it for a younger audience. You know, she wrote it for the youth of her organization. So, like, not overly surprising. I wouldn't say, you know, okay, if you're reading this, blah, 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 like, if you're a big reader, don't worry about it. I would ask you, well, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
If you're looking for, like, I want a nice book that I don't have to think too much about, go ahead and read this one.
Yeah.
It's great. It's fun. It's a lot of, like, you'll get through it easy. Fun characters. It's different. It's different from what you would normally pick up, but it's easy. You know? If you're looking for some...
Hello?
I can't help with that
Wait.
while you're on a call.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what happened there.
I don't know. You just cut out.
Yeah, I'd say for sure. Approve with an asterisk.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely excited to check out the second book.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where she goes with it.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that will do it. So let us know what you thought about the City of Brown and the Daevabad series. All right.
And we'll see you when we turn the page.
Oh, I forgot it. I forgot again. I
said it. It's cool.
Oh, man. Oh, oh, man. If anybody clips this, clip that, please, when I forget. All right. So, yeah, it's, come on, outro, play. Oh, right there. I didn't select it. Okay. There. All right. All right, guys, that will do it. That's LB, that's myself, and the new schedule should be out tomorrow or Monday. I will see you Monday for a brand new episode of Storytime, Pokemon Ash's Tale 14+. Until we see each other again, my friends, take care, be safe, be well, and I love you guys. 90,000. Peace.